Vincent Russo noticed the little girl before he noticed the men sent to kill him. He sat alone at the end of the row of plastic chairs in the crowded terminal at JFK, a charcoal suit and dark tie trying to make him look like any other businessman catching a late flight. One carry-on at his feet, one one-way ticket to Los Angeles in his inside pocket, and one promise echoing in his head. Tonight, he would stop being Vinnie Russo, the man people whispered about, and start being nobody. She couldn't have been more than 8. Pink sneakers, a backpack too big for her shoulders, and a cheap plastic crown tangled in brown curls. She stood in the middle of the walkway, people flowing around her like a river around a stone, clutching the handle of a tiny rolling suitcase covered in worn cartoon stickers. Her lips trembled, but she held the tears back with the stubborn courage only children and desperate men have. But before we continue, I want to make a very special invitation. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and are enjoying my stories. And comment below which city you're watching us from. Now, let's continue. Vincent watched her for exactly 3 seconds before looking away. Lost kids weren't his problem. Not anymore. He had spent a lifetime fixing other people's problems with violence and fear, and tonight he was buying his way out with a different kind of courage, walking away. No more debts, no more orders, no more quiet nods that meant make him disappear without saying the words. Just a plane, a new city, and a chance to die as someone else. Still, his eyes drifted back. The girl turned in a slow, uncertain circle, suitcase wheel catching on a crack in the floor. She stumbled, caught herself and looked around again. No hand reaching for her, no soft voice calling her name, just announcements booming overhead and strangers rushing past, too busy to notice the small, terrified statue in the middle of the terminal. Vincent's jaw tightened. There were security guards 15 yards away, a help desk 10 yards further, and cameras everywhere. He could stand up, point, and let someone in uniform handle it. That was what a man who wanted no trouble would do. That was what a man who truly wanted to disappear would do. Instead, he stood up. Even after everything, command still lived in his posture. People made room without knowing why as he walked toward her, his shoes clicking on the polished floor. When he stopped in front of her, she had to tilt her head all the way back to see his face. Her eyes were big, wet, and very, very brave. "Are you lost?" he asked, voice low and calm, the way he used to sound before saying something that changed a man's life forever. She blinked, hesitated, then surprised him with a question of her own. "Are you lost too, sir?" The words hit harder than any punch. Lost. He hadn't thought of himself that way, but now that she'd said it out loud, it fit. A man leaving a life behind with nothing but a bag and a ticket wasn't traveling. He was drifting. For a moment, Vincent forgot the ticket, the cameras, the shadows he'd felt since stepping out of the cab. All he saw was a girl in a plastic crown, asking him the one question nobody in his world dared to ask. "Something like that," he answered. He forced a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Where's your mum?" The girl's fingers clenched around the suitcase handle. "She went to get coffee," she said. "She told me, 'Emma, stay right here by those chairs. I'll be right back.'" But then the number on the screen changed and everybody moved, and I think I moved too. Her voice cracked on the last word, as if she was afraid that if she said it any louder, it would make everything real. "Emma," he repeated quietly, tasting the name. Gentle, harmless, nothing like the names usually thrown around him. "Okay, Emma, let's find your mom." He held out his hand before thinking it through. His hands had opened car doors and coffins, held guns and contracts and envelopes stuffed with money. Now they hovered in the air, waiting for something entirely different. Trust. For a heartbeat, he almost pulled it back, afraid of how wrong it looked. Emma stared at his hand, then placed her small palm inside it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Warm, steady, no hesitation. Trust came easier to her than to him. They started walking slowly, toward the row of seats where she thought she'd been. Vincent's eyes moved constantly, counting cameras and exits without meaning to. Old instincts coiled in the back of his mind, whispering, "Check the reflections. Don't let anyone behind you for too long. Always know who's watching." "So," he said, trying to sound like any man making small talk with a kid, "where are you flying to?" "Seattle," Emma answered, "to see my grandma. She makes cookies bigger than my face." She held up a hand to show exactly how big her face was. "Mom says maybe we'll stay longer this time." Maybe forever. She's tired of New York. Vincent's chest tightened. He understood the feeling. New York was noise and neon and blood under the snow. It was all he'd ever known, and he was more tired of it than he'd ever admit. Seattle's a good place to start over, he said. Quieter. Lots of rain to wash things away. They reached the chairs. Most were empty now, passengers already lining up at a nearby gate. Emma scanned every face, hope flickering to life whenever she saw a woman with dark hair and a coffee cup, then dimming again. Each disappointment pushed her shoulders a little lower. What if she got on the wrong plane? Emma whispered. What if she left without me? She didn't leave you, Vincent said more sharply than he meant to. He'd seen people walk away for good, seen them choose fear or money over family, but he couldn't put that weight on this girl. Not here. Not tonight. Moms don't forget their kids at airports. She's here somewhere. We'll find her. He was about to suggest they go to the nearest officer, when something in the reflection of the big glass window made his stomach drop. Two men in dark suits stood near the wall, pretending to study the departure board. Too still, too aware. Their eyes weren't on the flights. They were on him. Every muscle in Vincent's body went cold and alert. His fingers tightened around Emma's without meaning to. "Does your hand hurt?" she asked softly, looking up at him. He forced himself to relax his grip. "No," he said. "I just don't want you to get lost again." In the glass, one of the men touched his ear, the way someone did with a hidden earpiece. The other shifted his weight, scanning the terminal in slow, practiced sweeps. These weren't random suits. They were hunters, and their quarry was standing right next to a child in a plastic crown. Vincent took a slow breath. Whatever life he'd hoped to start in Los Angeles, whatever clean slate he thought a new name and a new city could give him, the past had just stepped off the plane and found him, right here, holding the hand of a girl who believed he wasn't lost at all. Vincent didn't move at first. He stood with Emma beside the row of chairs, his hand loosely holding hers, his eyes fixed on the reflection in the glass. The two men didn't come closer, yet. They watched the terminal, shifting just enough to look natural, but not enough to be ordinary travelers. They blended in, but only to someone who didn't know better. Vincent knew better. He always had. Emma tugged his hand lightly. "Do you see my mum?" she asked, scanning the crowd as if she could will her mother into existence by staring hard enough. "Not yet," he said. He forced his voice to stay calm, gentle. She didn't need to feel what was happening around them. She didn't need to know that the air was tightening, not with fear but with inevitability. He knelt beside her so they were eye to eye. "Emma, I want you to stay close to me, okay? Really close. Airports can get confusing, and I don't want you to get mixed up again." She nodded, her crown slipping sideways. He brushed it back into place. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay right next to you." He stood again and looked around, not for danger. He already knew where that was, but for options. The security desk was visible, but the line in front of it was long. Announcements echoed through the terminal, shifting the crowd like waves. Every few seconds, a group surged one way or another as new gate numbers lit up on the screens. Movement everywhere, noise everywhere. Perfect cover. He could use that. "We're going to walk a little," he said. "Is it to find my mum?" "Yes, and to make sure she can find us too." He led her gently into the crowd. She walked quickly to keep up, her sneakers tapping against the tile, her suitcase wheels rattling behind her like a loyal companion. Vincent didn't rush, didn't draw attention, but every step was measured, precise. He moved them diagonally, not straight, letting waves of passengers swallow them and then spit them out a few yards away. Emma didn't notice the strategy in his movements, but she noticed the people. "There are so many," she whispered. "It's like a school of fish." He smiled despite everything. Exactly like that. They reached a busier stretch of the terminal with shops and a small food court. Vincent paused near a brightly lit bookstore window, filled with travel guides and children's books. The light washed over them, making them look less like targets and more like a man and a child choosing a book for a flight. He glanced discreetly at the reflections again. The men had moved. They were closer. One pretended to answer a call. The other pretended to read a closed magazine. They weren't sloppy, but they weren't subtle enough for him. They were closing the distance because they figured he'd spotted them. That meant they were getting impatient. "Vincent," Emma said softly, "you're squeezing my hand again." He loosened his grip. "Sorry, just thinking." "About your flight?" Something flickered in his expression. "Something like that." Then, unexpectedly, Emma. What does your mum look like? Her clothes, her hair, anything. She has a brown coat, Emma said immediately, and her drink has whipped cream. She always gets extra, even when she says she won't. Vincent chuckled. Okay, brown coat, too much whipped cream, we'll look for that. He led her again, this time slower, giving himself moments to scan the environment. He never looked directly at the men, but he always knew where they were. They followed him with confidence, not concern. That meant they didn't plan to make a scene. They were waiting, watching, positioning, which meant he had time. Just not much. Emma's head turned suddenly. Vincent, that looks like her coat. She pointed toward a cafe counter on the far side of the terminal. A woman in a brown coat stood with her back turned, holding a coffee cup piled with whipped cream, exactly as described. Hope bloomed across Emma's face so fast it made Vincent's chest tighten. Let's go, she begged. He held her shoulders gently. Wait, look at me. She blinked. Why? I need you to stay beside me. No running. Airports are tricky. We stay together. Deal? She nodded instantly. Deal. He took her hand again, and they began moving toward the cafe. Emma practically bounced with anticipation, her suitcase thudding behind her. Vincent kept his pace steady, his eyes low, his body angled to block any clear view of Emma from behind. When they were halfway there, he risked a glance at the window reflection. The men shadowed them from two different angles, getting ready to close in. Not violently, not here, but inevitably. If they reached him before Emma reached her mother, everything would get complicated. Too complicated for a child. They were 30 feet from the woman. 20. 15. Emma lifted her free hand and waved. Mom! Mom! The woman didn't turn. Vincent exhaled slowly. Almost there. Then he felt it, a shift in the air, a presence closing in. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The steps behind him were too controlled, too deliberately casual. The men were moving for the intercept. Vincent, Emma murmured. Why are you walking faster? Because your mom is right there, he said. 5 more steps. 4. 3. Emma let go of his hand and ran the last few feet, this time safely, straight into the woman's arms as she turned around in confusion and then overwhelming relief. Emma, what are you doing here? I told you to stay by the chairs. Mom, Emma sobbed. I thought I lost you. Vincent stopped a few feet away, letting them have their reunion. His heart eased for the first time in hours. She was safe, really safe. That mattered more than what happened next. But as he turned slightly, he caught the reflection again. The two men were closing in, not running, not rushing, just arriving. One of them spoke his name under the noise of the terminal, a quiet summons only he could hear. He looked back at Emma, hugging her mother. The crown had fallen crooked again. Her smile returned, small but real. She waved at him. He managed a smile and waved back. She mouthed, "Thank you." And Vincent Russo, who had spent a lifetime being feared, felt something unfamiliar break open in him, something warm, fragile, and dangerous in its own way. He turned to face the men walking toward him. No violence, no chaos, just the inevitable, and the dangerous truth that for the first time in years, he wasn't standing alone anymore. Just as Emma reunited with her mother, 2 men quietly approached Vincent in the airport. They called him by name and made it clear, without threats, without weapons, that they worked for someone from his past, Anthony Caruso. Trouble had found him again, but not loudly, not yet. Emma pointed at him from across the terminal, asking, "Are those your friends?" The question hit Vincent harder than it should. To protect her and her mother from anything connected to his old world, he told them he just needed a minute with the men. Taken to an unused gate area, Vincent faced the truth directly. Caruso knew he had tried to disappear, and he didn't approve. According to the men, Marco, calm and controlled, and Tom, younger and sharper, no one simply retires from Caruso without settling accounts. They offered Vincent 2 paths: start his new life, always looking over his shoulder, or attend 1 meeting that night and walk out with a clean slate. Vincent agreed, but only with one non-negotiable condition. Emma and her mother, who had stumbled unknowingly into his past, must board their plane safely with no delays, no questions, no shadows following them. Marco accepted. Tom complained. Vincent didn't bend. Tom headed to the Seattle gate to make sure the girl was protected. Marco stayed with Vincent. As he finally sat down, Vincent watched the flow of travelers and imagined Emma, plastic crown slightly crooked, walking toward her jet bridge. And he understood something new. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from danger. He was choosing to face it, so it would never touch someone innocent again. Tom's call came quickly. Emma's plane had taken off safely, without delays or interference. Hearing it, Vincent felt a weight lift. She and her mother were finally out of danger, far from anything tied to his past. Marco watched his reaction carefully, noting how unusual it was for a man in Vincent's position to protect a child instead of using her as leverage. Vincent simply replied that he wasn't the same man anymore. Accepting the inevitable, Vincent agreed to meet Caruso that night. He walked calmly through the terminal with Marco and Tom, appearing like ordinary co-workers, though every instinct reminded him he was being escorted back into a world he'd tried to leave behind. Outside, the cold night air hit hard. Tom pointed him toward a dark sedan, and despite every warning instinct, Vincent stepped inside willingly. As the car slid into the city, the three men spoke quietly about Vincent's past, how he'd once talked his way through violent situations, how Caruso had valued his ability to turn confrontations into negotiations. Vincent admitted he regretted the moments when people had seen him not as a man, but as a message. Their drive took them into an older part of the city, down narrow streets and forgotten alleys, until they reached a warehouse that no longer looked like one inside. It had been transformed into a private meeting hall, quiet, controlled, and unmistakably Caruso's domain. Caruso waited at the far end, older now but still commanding, the kind of presence that bent rooms around him. He welcomed Vincent with a dry remark about choosing a dramatic night to return, then asked him to sit. Once they were face to face, Caruso revealed he already knew about the girl, about Emma, the crown, the way Vincent had protected her with no hidden agenda. He wasn't questioning the act itself, but the meaning behind it. Why had Vincent, a man trained to disappear, chosen to stand exposed in the middle of an airport with a child at his side? Vincent answered honestly, "When a child asks if you're lost, you either lie or you start trying not to be." Caruso studied him, and for the first time, something like respect surfaced in his eyes. It was clear that this meeting wasn't just about unfinished business. It was about deciding what Vincent was going to become next. Caruso took his time before speaking, examining Vincent as if trying to understand the man who had walked willingly into his domain after months of silence. Most men, he said, sat in that chair begging for forgiveness or making excuses. Vincent, however, had walked in claiming he was trying to stop being lost, something Caruso had never heard before. When Caruso asked what had happened at the airport, Vincent finally admitted the truth. Emma had been alone, frightened, and invisible to everyone around her. Helping her hadn't been strategy or hesitation. It had been instinct. He was tired of stepping over people who needed help just because it was safer to stay uninvolved. Caruso told Vincent he'd seen airport footage, the girl spinning in circles, Vincent rising to help her, guiding her through crowds without ever dropping his guard. "You protected her like she was made of glass," Caruso said. Vincent answered simply, "That's what adults are supposed to do for children." Then Caruso shifted the conversation. He told Vincent about his grandson, 8 years old, curious, bright, who had seen something dangerous near his school. In the past, Caruso would have handled such problems with force, but now the world was full of cameras, laws, and consequences. To protect his family, he had pulled his daughter and grandson out, giving ground he never expected to give. Rivals interpreted this as weakness. He needed a new kind of strength, someone who could impose order without fear, someone who could keep innocent people out of harm's way. Seeing Vincent at the airport, calm and in control, had shown him that the man he once trusted still knew how to handle storms quietly. Vincent realized then, he wasn't unfinished business to Caruso. He was being recruited for a different role entirely. Caruso didn't want him back as an enforcer. He wanted him as a protector, a strategist, someone who could keep the peace and prevent trouble before it spread. No violence, no intimidation, no old habits. Vincent hesitated. He thought of Emma's small hand in his, of her voice asking if he was lost too. He thought of the plane lifting into the clouds, carrying her toward a safer life. Something inside him shifted. Maybe he didn't need to run to become someone new. Maybe he needed to choose who he stood for. But Vincent set one absolute boundary. Children and innocent families must never be touched. Not by accident, not by pressure, not ever. If Caruso asked him to cross that line, their agreement would end that very moment. For a long second, the room held its breath. Then Caruso stood, slowly, carefully, and offered his hand. He accepted the rule without argument. In return, he offered Vincent what he had been searching for without realizing it. A chance, Caruso said, not to disappear, to become someone you can live with. Vincent took the hand. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't a victory. It was the start of a different kind of life, and for the first time one he had actually chosen. The deal didn't become real in that warehouse. It became real the next morning, under a gray New York sky that looked like it had forgotten how to be anything else. Vincent woke in his old apartment, a place he hadn't set foot in for months. The walls were the same dull cream. The furniture was the same careful mix of cheap and sturdy, but the way he moved through the rooms was different. No packed bag by the door, no ticket in his pocket. His escape route had turned into a loop that brought him right back here. On the kitchen counter, beside a chipped mug and a half-dead plant, lay a phone. Not his. A simple black model with nothing in it except a single contact. Marco. It had been waiting for him when he got home, placed neatly on the doormat. No note, no instructions. Just trust us enough to pick it up. He stared at it for a long moment before tapping the screen. It lit up, patient and blank. He thought of the other phone that mattered now, the one somewhere over the country, still probably in Emma's backpack if she had one. Maybe she was in Seattle already. Maybe she'd woken up in a different time zone, telling her grandma about the man at the airport who'd helped her find her mom. "Are you lost too, sir?" "Not anymore, kid," he thought. "I just picked a different map." The phone buzzed in his hand. Caller ID, Marco. "Morning," Vincent said, answering. "Morning," Marco replied. "You sleep?" "Enough." "Good, we've got something." Of course they did. The world hadn't paused to let Vincent adjust to his new role. It was already moving, already pulling him into its current. "Talk," Vincent said. "There's a grocery on 12th and Beach," Marco said. "Family place. Been there 40 years. They pay their rent, they pay their suppliers, they pay us. Small, regular, respectful. Then 3 weeks ago, another crew shows up. New faces. Different neighborhood. They promise the store cheaper insurance if they switch sides." "Let me guess," Vincent said. "The owner said no." "First," Marco said. "Then his delivery truck got lost twice. Then someone spread a rumor about expired meat. Health inspectors showed up. Now he's worried. He's thinking about folding the store or taking the new deal. Either way, people see us as weak." "So you want a reminder delivered," Vincent said. Marco's voice stayed level. "Caruso wants you to keep the fire away from the kids. That store is where half the block sends their sons when they're old enough to carry a bag home. If it closes or flips to the other side, the new crew turns it into a message. To everyone." Vincent pictured it. A place where people bought bread and milk and gossip becoming a symbol of whoever shouted the loudest. "All right," he said. "Tell me what I'm walking into." "Owner's name is Rafael Morales," Marco said. 50, maybe. Wife, grown son, teenage daughter. The other crew hasn't put hands on anyone yet. They're not stupid. They just keep tightening the screws. You go in, you make it clear that siding with them is not an option. But you do it your way. No broken glass, no sirens, no kids having nightmares because some guy screamed in their father's face. "You'll be nearby," Vincent said. It wasn't a question. "We'll be in the area," Marco replied. "But this is your play." Vincent ended the call and looked around the apartment once more. The air felt different, charged, expectant. He wasn't walking away from his old life. He was walking deeper into it, with a different purpose. He put on a plain dark jacket, neutral shoes, nothing that screamed power or weakness. On his way out the door, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. Same face, same lines, same eyes that had watched too many deals play out. But behind them, something had shifted. He still knew how to be a storm. Today, he'd try to be something else. The grocery store on 12th and Beach looked like every other corner store that had survived on stubbornness and familiarity. A faded awning, handwritten signs in the window advertising weekly specials. The bell above the door jingled when Vincent stepped inside. The place smelled like coffee, oranges, and something warm baking in the back. Shelves lined with cans and cereal boxes. A small produce section. An old radio near the register. playing a low, scratchy song from another decade. Behind the counter stood a man with tired eyes and strong hands. Rafael Morales, if Vincent had to guess. He watched Vincent enter with the wary curiosity of someone who'd met too many strangers lately and liked none of them. "Morning," Rafael said. "Morning," Vincent replied. He glanced around as if he were just checking prices. Two teenage boys argued quietly near the chips. An elderly woman examined tomatoes, squeezing them gently. A girl in a school uniform, probably Rafael's daughter, stocked shelves halfway down the aisle, earbuds in. Family place, community place, a place that had never asked to be part of anyone's war. Vincent approached the counter. "You Rafael?" Rafael's jaw tightened. "Depends who's asking." "A friend of the man who's been keeping this street quiet for a long time," Vincent said calmly. "The one you stopped calling 3 weeks ago." Rafael's eyes darkened. "I didn't stop calling, I just didn't know if anyone was listening." "We're listening now," Vincent said. "Mind if we talk?" Rafael glanced at the customers. "I'm working." "Then let me help," Vincent said. "You talk, I bag." Without waiting for permission, Vincent stepped around the side of the counter and grabbed a stack of paper bags. The old woman brought her tomatoes and a loaf of bread. While Rafael rang her up, Vincent packed everything carefully, handling the produce like it was made of glass. As the woman left, he leaned in slightly. "They came here again." Rafael kept his eyes on the register. 2 nights ago. Late. Said it would be a shame if the neighborhood forgot I existed, that other stores could take my place. "Names?" Vincent asked. Rafael shook his head. "They didn't give any. Tall one did all the talking. The shorter one smiled a lot, like this was all a game." "How'd they leave it?" "Gave me a week," Rafael said, "to think." Vincent glanced at the clock above the fridge units. "Then we have 5 days to remind them this place isn't up for grabs." Rafael's daughter walked up now, earbuds hanging around her neck. "Dad, the milk in the back is almost out. She stopped when she saw Vincent behind the counter. Her shoulders straightened. "We don't need more friends," she said. "She's protective," Rafael muttered. "This is my daughter Lena." Vincent nodded. "Good instinct. You're right not to trust new faces." "So why should we trust yours?" Lena asked, chin lifting. "Because I made sure a girl your age got on a plane last night," he thought. "Because I promised myself I wouldn't let shadows like mine fall across kids like you." Out loud he said, "Because the people who've been squeezing you don't like what happens when I get involved." Lena's eyes narrowed. "So you're worse than them?" "No," Vincent said, quiet but firm. "I'm just better at choosing who walks away." The bell above the door jingled again. 3 men walked in. Not locals. Clothes a little too sharp, movements a little too relaxed for a corner grocery on a weekday morning. The tall one and the smiling one, plus a third who looked like he enjoyed lifting things other people dropped. They froze just for a fraction of a second when they saw Vincent behind the counter. Then their faces smoothed into masks. "Morning," the tall one said, his voice casual. "Busy day, Mr. Morales?" Rafael's hands clenched on the edge of the counter. Lena moved closer to him. Vincent stepped forward just enough to be between the newcomers and the family. "We're doing all right," he said. "You lost?" The tall man's eyes flicked over him, measuring, cataloguing. "Don't think so. We're right where we meant to be." The one with the easy smile glanced at Vincent's hands, his stance, the way he claimed the space without raising his voice. Recognition sparked. "You're new," he said softly. "Or maybe you're old and we just haven't met." Vincent held his gaze. "Either way, you've had your talk. You gave your week. I'm here to tell you the answer is no." The tall man tilted his head. "You speak for him now?" "I speak for the line you crossed," Vincent said. "So you start pushing families that have kept their corner clean, you're not expanding. You're stealing, and the man I work for doesn't let thieves rewrite maps." Silence settled, thick as dust. Lena's breathing hitched behind him. Rafael's jaw worked. The smiling man's grin widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "You think you can stand in here and redraw the map by yourself?" "I don't have to be by myself," Vincent said, still calm. "Look outside." They hesitated, then turned their heads just enough to glance through the front windows. Across the street, leaning casually against parked cars, stood 3 men with their hands in their pockets, not staring, not posturing, just present. Marco among them, looking at his phone like this was just another slow morning. Reinforcements, visible enough to be noticed, calm enough to be believable. The tall man's jaw tightened. "This isn't your block anymore. he said. It never stopped being ours, Vincent replied. You just thought the old man upstairs was getting soft. You were wrong. The smiling one's expression flickered just for a heartbeat. He saw it, the miscalculation, the sudden awareness that this wasn't going to be easy. Here's what happens, Vincent continued. You walk out of this store, you don't come back. You focus your energy someplace else, somewhere that doesn't have kids buying milk on their way home from school. You pretend this address doesn't exist. And if we don't? The tall man asked quietly. Then every time you step onto a street we care about, Vincent said, just as quiet. You'll feel eyes on you. Not hands, not fists, just eyes. Your deals won't stick. Your promises won't land. Doors won't open. You'll be ghosts in a city that refuses to see you. No shouting, no threats spelled out in blood, just the truth of what it meant to be on the wrong side of the quiet. The men exchanged glances. This wasn't the war they'd prepared for. They'd come expecting noise, a show of dominance they could match. Instead, they'd walked into a decision already made. Finally, the tall man stepped back. This isn't over, he said. It is for this store, Vincent replied. Go test your luck somewhere else. They left. The bell jingled again, absurdly small in the heavy quiet they left behind. Raphael let out a breath he'd been holding for minutes. Lena stared at Vincent like she wasn't sure whether to thank him or throw him out. You didn't break anything, she said. You didn't even raise your voice. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do, Vincent said, is show people they're outnumbered long before they throw the first punch. Raphael swallowed. So, what happens now? Now you go back to selling groceries, Vincent said. If anyone else comes sniffing around, you call the number I'm about to give you. And you keep the crown on your daughter's head, not on some stranger's. Lena frowned. What crown? Long story, Vincent said softly. But it ends with people getting where they're supposed to go. The ride back from 12th and Beach was quiet. Vincent sat in the back of Marco's sedan, watching the city slide past like scenes from a life he'd once lived and was now relearning piece by piece. Street vendors setting up for the afternoon rush, kids walking home with backpacks bouncing, a dog tugging its owner across a crosswalk, all ordinary, all fragile. He had protected something that mattered, not with force, but with presence, with strategy, with the quiet kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. And for the first time, the job felt right. Not clean, but right. You handled that well, Marco said from the passenger seat, glancing back. Vincent didn't answer immediately. His mind was still half in the grocery store, half on a plane somewhere northwest. It could have gone wrong, he finally said. But it didn't, Marco replied. And that's the thing, men like them underestimate patience. They expect noise. You gave them silence. That's harder to fight. Tom, driving, smirked. Never seen three guys leave a store looking like they'd been told to sit in the corner. They'll come back, Vincent said. Not there, but somewhere. They'll test another street, another family. Marco nodded. Which is why Caruso wants to see you tonight. Vincent stiffened. Tonight? Yeah. He said it's not a briefing, it's something else. That unsettled him more than any threat. Caruso was a man of precision. Meetings weren't something else. They were points on a map. Changing the category meant the map itself was shifting. Where? Vincent asked. His house, Marco said. 7 sharp. Caruso's house wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. If he wanted Vincent there, it meant trust or scrutiny. Maybe both. Tom pulled up in front of Vincent's building. Try not to overthink it, he said. If he wanted you gone, you'd have never made it out of that warehouse. That's what worries me, Vincent replied, stepping out. Back inside his apartment, he showered, changed into a clean shirt and paced the living room. He wasn't afraid, not of Caruso, not of whatever waited behind that front door. What unsettled him was the feeling he hadn't had in years. Anticipation. The kind that comes when a man stands in the doorway of a new identity and isn't sure whether to step through. He checked the clock. 6:12. Too early to leave, too restless to sit. His mind drifted again, back to Emma. Did she land safely? Did her grandmother hug her so tightly she squeaked? Did she still have that plastic crown on her head? He hoped so. He hoped she'd keep wearing it long after this day blended into others. His new phone buzzed on the table. A text from Marco. Cars outside. Vincent grabbed his jacket and headed down. Caruso's home sat on a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn, A townhouse with a brick facade, wide windows, and a front yard neatly trimmed by someone who cared more about appearances than gardening. It didn't look like the home of a man who controlled half the city's undercurrents. It looked like a place where a grandmother baked cookies on weekends while kids ran down the hall. Marco led Vincent to the door, knocked once, then stepped aside. A young woman answered. Early 30s, dark hair pulled into a loose bun. Gentle eyes that reminded Vincent faintly of someone he couldn't place. "You must be Vincent," she said. "I'm Elena. Come in." Elena, Caruso's daughter. He entered cautiously. The house smelled like lemons and warm bread, walls decorated with family photos, shelves stacked with books and children's toys, a staircase plastered with crayon drawings. It was disarming. Too normal. Elena guided him to the dining room. Caruso sat at the head of a long wooden table, not in a suit but in a sweater, sleeves rolled up. A small boy, maybe 8, maybe 9, sat beside him, coloring quietly. So this was the grandson, the kid whose safety had begun a chain of choices that led Vincent here. Caruso looked up. "You're early." "You invited me," Vincent said. "I figured being early was safer than being late." Caruso chuckled. "Sit." Vincent did. Eleanor set a plate of food in front of him, a simple meal, warm and homemade. He couldn't remember the last time someone cooked for him without wanting something in return. "This," Caruso said, gesturing at the room, the table, the child, "is why I do what I do. Why you're here. Not for the noise outside. Not for the men who want to redraw the map. For this." Vincent nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," Caruso said, softer this time. "You think you understand. But understanding means meeting the boy who'll live with the consequences of everything we do." The child looked up then, curious. His eyes were bright and steady, nothing like the shadows Vincent was used to. "Vincent," Caruso said, "this is Luca." Luca offered a small wave. "Hi." Vincent cleared his throat. "Hey, kid." Luca looked him over. "Are you one of Grandpa's helpers?" Vincent blinked. "Something like that. Do you make people behave?" the boy asked. Vincent glanced at Caruso, unsure how to answer. Caruso nodded once, letting him know it was all right. "I try," Vincent said. "Mostly by talking." Luca smiled at that. "Grandpa says talking is stronger than yelling." "Smart man," Vincent murmured. Caruso leaned forward now, the air shifting. "Vincent, today you protected a family you don't know. You did it quietly, cleanly. No witnesses with shaking hands, no kids crying in the cereal aisle. I needed to see you could do that. I needed to see who you are when no orders are given." "And now?" Vincent asked. "Now," Caruso said, "I need you to see what you're protecting. My family, neighborhood families, shopkeepers, kids like Luca, kids like that little girl in the airport." Vincent's chest tightened slightly. Caruso continued, voice low, "Any man can make fear. Very few can make peace in a place built on threats. You showed me today you can do both. If you stay with me, if you take this new role, you'll be shaping the future, not just surviving it." Vincent looked at Luca again. The boy smiled before returning to his drawing, a stick figure under a bright sun. He thought of Emma's crown. He thought of Raphael's store. He thought of the 3 men walking out without a fight. Maybe this was what not being lost looked like. He turned back to Caruso. "What exactly do you want from me?" Caruso smiled. "Not with power, but with certainty. I want you to help me build something that keeps the wolves away without becoming one of them." For the first time in a long time, Vincent felt something like direction settling inside him, something like purpose. "All right," he said. "Tell me where to start." Caruso nodded once, deeply. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take back the docks." The next morning broke colder than Vincent expected, the kind of cold that made the East River look like steel stretching under a pale sky. He stood beside Marco on the pier, hands in his jacket pockets, watching crates roll down conveyor belts, while forklifts hummed like lazy insects. The docks had always been a place of quiet tension, too many moving parts, too much money changing hands, too many eyes watching from behind cracked windows of warehouses that pretended to be empty. But today, the tension had a different flavor. Controlled, calculated, ready. Marco pointed with his chin toward a warehouse painted the dull blue of peeling paint and salt. "That's where the trouble's been coming from. New crew thinks they can redirect shipments, skim inventory, take a piece out of every pocket that walks through here. Vincent followed the line of sight. A few men stood near the loading bay, jackets too clean, posture too loose, trying and failing to blend in. "They're waiting," Vincent said, "for someone to call the bluff." "You're that someone," Marco replied. Vincent exhaled slowly. "Caruso didn't ask for force." "No," Marco said. "He asked for clarity. Let's give it to them." They walked down the pier. Workers paused long enough to glance up. Some recognized Marco, a few recognized Vincent. Most just sensed the shift in the air and stepped aside. The closer they got to the warehouse, the quieter the dock seemed to become, as if sound was retreating ahead of them. The men near the loading bay straightened. The tallest one, a wedge-shaped man with a stiff jaw, stepped forward. "You're far from your side of the river," he said. Vincent didn't raise his voice. "The river doesn't have sides, not anymore." "That's so?" the man asked. Vincent took one more step, stopping just inside comfortable distance. "Your crew has 3 options. You leave these docks, quietly and permanently. You work under Caruso's agreement like everyone else does, fairly consistently without your sideshow taxes. Or you stay and we stand here all day until you realize you're surrounded by a city that won't do business with you anymore." The man laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You think you can just walk in here and rewrite the rules?" Vincent didn't smile. "The rules were written before you showed up." The man's followers shifted, clearly waiting for him to escalate. But something in Vincent's tone made him hesitate. Or maybe it was the way Marco stood behind Vincent, calm, hands in pockets, like nothing about this moment worried him. "This place is ours now," the man said. "We earned it." Vincent shook his head once. "You stole it, and you did it sloppily. Too many complaints, too many shortages, too many workers afraid to open their mouths. That's not earning. That's shaking down people who have more to do than lock horns with amateurs." A murmur moved through the onlookers, dock workers, forklift drivers, supervisors pretending not to watch. The man's jaw clenched. "Big words." "Small patience," Vincent replied. "Don't test it." For a beat, no one moved. The air tightened the way a room does before a storm. Vincent kept his breathing steady. "Listen to me," he continued. "No threats, no shouting. But if you stay here, if you keep poking holes in a system that's worked for decades, you will spend every day looking over your shoulder. Not for violence. Caruso doesn't need that. But for silence. For deals falling apart, for suppliers losing your paperwork, for shipments diverted. For every door you knock on to stay closed. Not out of fear, out of inconvenience. You won't be chased. You'll be ignored." The tall man blinked. Something inside him recognized the truth of that. "Who are you?" he asked, voice quieter now. Vincent stepped closer. "Someone who knows what happens when you let rot spread. Someone who's done running from his own shadow. Someone who will make sure places like this," he gestured at the dock, "belong to the people who keep them alive, not the ones who drain them dry." Silence again, but this time the weight shifted. The tall man looked at his crew. They looked back, unsure. The power they thought they had was dissolving under something more potent than force. Certainty. Finally he lifted his chin. "Fine," he said. "We walk. No fight, no pushback. Just resignation wrapped in pride." The men stepped away from the loading bay, heading toward the side street where an old van was parked. They didn't run, but they didn't look back either. When they were gone, Marco let out a low breath. "You know," he said, "I've broken up 100 of these standoffs. Not one of them ended without someone throwing something." Vincent shrugged lightly. "Maybe they were waiting for someone to talk to them like adults." Marco snorted. "You talked to them like they already lost." "Because they did," Vincent replied, "the moment they walked in here thinking fear was the foundation." A supervisor approached them, a weathered man with sunburned cheeks and wind-cracked hands. "You handled that clean," he said, voice gruff. "Thank you." "Just keeping the peace," Vincent said, but the supervisor shook his head. "No, keeping peace is one thing, keeping dignity is another. Appreciate you knowing the difference." Marco clapped Vincent on the shoulder as they walked away. "Caruso's going to like how this played." "Caruso likes results," Vincent said, "but I'm not doing this for him." Marco raised an eyebrow. Vincent glanced at the river, the skyline beyond it, the quiet hum of work resuming behind them. "I'm doing it for the kid who asked if I was lost," he said softly, "and for all the people who never get asked at all." That evening, Vincent returned to his apartment. He didn't turn on the lights right away. He stood by the window, watching the city pulse under the night sky. Somewhere out there were a dozen problems waiting, but that no longer made him feel cornered. It made him feel necessary. His new phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. A picture. Vincent opened it. It was Emma, in Seattle, grinning, plastic crown on her head, holding a cookie bigger than her face. Under it, a message typed by her mother. She says, "Thank you again." She says you're not lost anymore. Vincent felt something warm settle into place. Quiet, steady, unmistakably real. He typed back only 2 words. Tell her she was right. For the first time in years, Vincent Russo didn't feel like he was running, hiding, or drifting. He felt found. He felt useful. He felt, finally, home. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.